The cobblestones of the Shiganshina district were already slick with red before the smoke cleared. A massive piece of the outer wall lay crushed in the middle of a house, and the screams of the dying did not sound like human voices anymore, but like the desperate squealing of trapped animals. The colossal titan had vanished into a cloud of steam, leaving behind a gaping hole that served as an open mouth for the world outside. Through the dust and the heat, the smaller titans poured in. They were mindless and naked, with smiles that stretched too wide for their faces. They walked with a terrifying stumble that mocked the panic of the people running beneath them. A garrison soldier stood on a rooftop, his hands shaking so hard he could not snap his blades into place. He watched a 15-meter titan pick up a woman and bite her in half. The blood rained down on the street and the soldier vomited. He prepared to die. He closed his eyes and waited for the hand to grab him. But the hand never came. Instead, a sound tore through the air that was louder than the cannon fire on the wall. It was a deep, booming crack that vibrated in the soldier's chest. He opened his eyes and saw the 15-meter titan falling backward. Its head was gone, not just bitten off or cut, but erased. The upper neck was a fountain of steaming blood and bone fragments that dissolved into the air. The giant body crashed into a bakery, sending flour and dust billowing up to mix with the gore. The soldier looked down into the alleyway where the shot had come from. The shadows there were dark, too dark for the bright afternoon sun. A man stepped out from the darkness. He was tall and wore a long red coat that looked like spilled blood. He wore a wide hat and orange glasses that hid his eyes. In his hand, he held a silver gun that was far too big for a human to lift, let alone fire with one hand. The titans nearby stopped. For the first time since the attack began, the monsters hesitated. They turned their heads toward the man in red. They did not look at him with hunger. They looked at him with confusion. Their instincts told them to eat humans, but their instincts were screaming that this thing was not a human. The man smiled. It was a wide, predatory grin that showed sharp teeth. He did not look afraid. He looked bored. He walked toward a group of 3 titans who were blocking the main street. The soldier on the roof wanted to scream at him to run, but his voice was stuck in his throat. The man in red raised his gun again. He did not aim carefully. He just pointed and pulled the trigger. The recoil should have broken his arm, but his hand did not even tremble. The bullet hit the first titan in the chest and blew a hole through it the size of a barrel. The titan fell screaming, a sound the soldier had never heard a titan make. The man laughed. It was a low, rumbling sound. He kept walking forward, shooting as he went. Every shot was a kill. Every step he took seemed to make the shadows around him grow longer and sharper. The shadows moved like snakes, slithering over the debris and wrapping around the ankles of the titans. The invaders were now the victims. A small titan lunged at the man, but before it could reach him, the shadows spiked up from the ground and pierced the monster through the chest, holding it in place. The man walked up to the trapped titan and placed the barrel of his silver gun against its forehead. He whispered something that the soldier could not hear and then pulled the trigger. The back of the titan's head exploded, painting the street with steam. This was not a battle. It was an extermination. The presence of this stranger felt heavier than the fear of the titans. The air grew cold and smelled of old iron. The soldier realized that the wall had not been broken to let the titans in. It felt like the wall had been broken to let this monster out. The balance of the world had shifted in seconds. The titans were no longer the top of the food chain. The man in red adjusted his glasses and looked up at the wall where the armored titan was preparing to charge. The man widened his smile. He had found a war worth fighting. The smoke from the broken wall rose up into the sky like a black tower. Hannes ran through the streets of Shiganshina. His boots hit the stone ground hard. His chest burned because he was running so fast. He was afraid. He had never been this afraid in his whole life. He had spent his days drinking and laughing and sitting on the wall. He thought the walls would stand forever. He was wrong. The peace was fake. The monsters were real. He turned a corner and saw the house where the Jaeger family lived. It was gone. The roof had fallen in. The wood was splintered and broken. Hannes saw the blonde hair of Carla Jaeger sticking out from under the heavy beams. He saw Erin and Mikasa trying to lift the wood. They were too small. They were crying. Hannes ran to them. He wanted to save them. He wanted to be a hero. He grabbed the wood and pulled. It didn't move. It was too heavy. The ground shook. Boom, boom, boom. The sound was getting closer. Hannes looked up. A titan was walking down the street. It was the smiling titan. It had a wide, terrible mouth filled with flat teeth. It looked happy. It looked like it was enjoying a nice walk. But it was walking toward the children. Hannes stood up. He pulled out his blades. He yelled a loud cry to make himself brave. He was going to kill the titan. He was going to save Carla. He took a step forward. Then the air changed. The smell of the titan was like rotting meat and hot copper. But suddenly, a new smell cut through it. It smelled like old blood and cold iron. A shadow moved across the ground. It was faster than a cloud. It moved like water. Hannes stopped. The smiling titan stopped too. The monster turned its big head to the side. A man was standing on top of the broken roof of the Jaeger house. He was not a soldier. He wore a long red coat and a big red hat. He wore glasses that glowed orange in the sun. He held a silver gun that was bigger than Erin's whole body. The man looked down at the titan. He did not look scared. He looked like a person looking at a bug. The titan reached for the man. The hand was huge. It could crush a horse. The man did not move. He just smiled. His smile was wider than the titan's smile. It was filled with sharp teeth. He lifted the gun. He did not aim. He just fired. The sound was like a cannon. The bullet hit the titan's hand. The hand did not just break. It exploded. Fingers and skin and bone turned into red mist. The titan pulled its arm back. It made a sound like a crying baby. The man laughed. It was a low, dark sound. He jumped down from the roof. He landed softly on the street between the titan and the children. Hannes watched with his mouth open. Erin stopped crying and stared. The man in red walked toward the titan. The titan tried to kick him. The man moved to the side. He was too fast to see. He put the gun against the titan's knee. He pulled the trigger. The leg blew apart. The giant monster fell to the ground with a loud crash. Steam rose up from its wounds. The man walked to the titan's face. He looked into its wide, smiling eyes. He spoke. His voice was smooth and deep. He said that the monster was pathetic. He said it was just a doll made of meat. The titan tried to bite him. The man shoved the barrel of the gun into the titan's mouth. He fired. The back of the titan's neck exploded. The monster went limp. It started to dissolve into steam. The man frowned. He touched the steaming blood on his coat. He licked his finger. Then he spit on the ground. He looked angry. He said the blood was dead. He said it was not food. He turned around and looked at Hannes and the children. His orange glasses shined. Hannes felt like a mouse looking at a cat. The man asked if they were going to run or just wait to die. Hannes snapped out of his trance. He remembered Carla. Hannes turned back to the house. The debris was still too heavy. The fire from the nearby houses had spread. The sparks were landing on the wood. Carla looked at the man in red. She did not look at Hannes. She saw something in the man's eyes that terrified her more than the titan. She screamed at Hannes to take the children and run. Hannes grabbed Erin and Mikasa. Aaron screamed. He wanted to save his mom. He reached out his hand. The man in red watched. He did not help lift the wood. He just watched. He seemed to be measuring them. He seemed to be waiting to see what they would do. Hannes threw Aaron over his shoulder. He grabbed Mikasa's arm. He ran. He ran away from the fire. He ran away from the woman he loved. He ran away from the man in red. Aaron hit Hannes on the back. He yelled that they could still save her. Hannes did not stop. He cried as he ran. Behind them, the fire consumed the house. The man in red stood there for a moment longer. He tipped his hat to the woman in the wreckage. Then he turned and walked the other way. He walked toward the inner gate. He walked toward the sounds of the other monsters. The streets were full of screaming people. Everyone was running to the boats. The canal was clogged with ships. Soldiers were yelling. They were trying to keep order, but they were terrified too. Titans were pouring into the city. There were too many of them. The soldiers on the ground were being eaten. Their blades broke against the hard skin of the Titans. Their gas ran out. They were grabbed and chewed and swallowed. The man in red walked through the panic. He did not run. He walked like a king. A 3-meter Titan ran out of an alley. It jumped at a woman carrying a basket of bread. The man in red did not even look. He pointed his left hand. He held a black gun in that hand. He fired. The bullet hit the Titan in the ear and came out the other side of its head. The Titan face planted into the street and slid to a stop at the woman's feet. The woman looked up at the man. She was shaking. The man walked past her. He stepped on the Titan's dissolving head. He kept walking. He was counting. He was counting the enemies. He was disappointed. They were weak. They were big, but they were stupid. They had no skill. They had no leader. It was like shooting targets at a carnival. He wanted a real fight. He wanted something that could kill him. He reached the main square near the inner gate, the gate that led to Wall Rose. The crowds were thick here. The garrison soldiers were lined up with cannons. They were aiming at the open hole in the outer wall, but the Titans were already inside. The soldiers were firing cannonballs into the streets. It was messy. It was desperate. Suddenly the ground shook harder than before. It was a rhythmic shaking. Thump, thump, thump. The water in the canal rippled. The soldiers stopped firing. They looked at the outer gate. Through the steam and the dust, a shape appeared. It was different. It was not like the other Titans. It had no skin. It was covered in plates of white armor. It looked like a knight. It had glowing yellow eyes. It crouched down like a sprinter at the starting line. It let out a breath of steam that hissed like a boiler. The soldiers screamed. It was the armored Titan. It began to run. It charged across the city. It smashed through buildings. It did not stumble. It was a battering ram of muscle and bone. It was heading straight for the inner gate. If it broke that gate, the Titans would get into Wall Rose. Humanity would lose another third of its land. The soldiers fired their cannons. The balls hit the armored Titan. They bounced off. The armor was too strong. The Titan did not even slow down. It was going to hit the gate. The soldiers ran away. They knew they could not stop it. But the man in red did not run away. He stood in the middle of the street. He stood directly in the path of the charging monster. He spread his arms wide. He smiled. He shouted. He shouted a greeting to the beast. He called it a worthy opponent. The armored Titan saw him. Reiner was inside the Titan. He was confused. Who was this human? Why was he not running? Reiner did not care. He had a mission. He had to break the gate. He would trample this fool. He pushed the Titan to run faster. The ground cracked under the Titan's feet. The distance closed. 100 meters. 50 meters. 10 meters. The man in red did not move. The armored titan lowered its shoulder to crush him. Just before the impact, the man in red vanished. He dissolved into a swarm of black bats. The bats flew around the titan's face. Reiner was blinded. He stumbled. The titan crashed into a clock tower. The stone tower fell on top of the titan. The bats came together on top of a nearby roof. They turned back into the man. He was laughing. He held both guns now, the silver one and the black one. He pointed them at the pile of rocks. The armored titan stood up. It shook off the stones. It looked angry. It roared. The roar was so loud it broke windows. The man in red fired. He fired both guns at the same time. He fired so fast it sounded like a continuous rip in the air. The bullets hit the titan's armor. Sparks flew. The bullets were special. They were made of melted silver from a church cross and filled with exploding mercury. They were made to kill vampires, not titans. But physics was still physics. The force of the impact pushed the titan back. The armor on its chest began to crack. Reiner felt the shocks inside. He was scared. This was impossible. Human weapons could not hurt him. Who was this guy? Reiner covered his face with his arms. He charged again. He had to ignore the pain. He had to hit the gate. The man in red stopped shooting. He saw that the bullets were not going deep enough. He sighed. He said that he had to use the dog. He lowered his guns. The shadows around him began to bubble. They turned into a black and red sludge. The sludge rose up. It took the shape of a giant dog. The dog had many eyes and many teeth. It was as big as a small house. The man pointed at the armored titan. The shadow dog lunged. It bit the armored titan's arm. The teeth of the shadow dog were not physical. They were magical. They bit through the armor like it was paper. Reiner screamed inside his titan. He felt his real arm breaking. The armored titan punched the shadow dog. The dog did not break. It turned to liquid and wrapped around the titan's fist. It started to eat the armor. Reiner panicked. He kicked the dog away. He was losing armor. He was losing speed. He looked at the gate. It was still closed. He looked at the man in red. The man was smiling a cruel smile. Reiner knew he could not win this fight. Not right now. But he had a mission. He made a choice. Reiner turned his back on the man. He hardened the armor on his legs and back. He crouched and jumped. He did not jump at the man. He jumped over him. He jumped toward the gate. He used all his power in one leap. The man in red looked surprised. He whistled. He was impressed by the desperation. The armored titan hit the inner gate with its shoulder. The gate bent. The stone cracked. The lock shattered. The gate flew open. Reiner rolled through the dust. He did not stop to fight. He kept running. He ran into the lands of Wool Rose. He disappeared into the smoke. The man in red stood alone in the breached gateway. The shadow dog melted back into his coat. He looked at the broken gate. He looked at the titan starting to swarm toward the opening. He had won the fight, but lost the objective. He did not care about the wall. He cared that the prey had escaped. He holstered his guns. He adjusted his glasses. He walked through the broken gate. He walked into Wool Rose. He was not a refugee. He was a hunter following a scent. The boats were leaving the dock. Hannes sat on the deck. He held his head in his hands. Eren and Mikasa sat next to him. They were wrapped in blankets. Eren was staring at the burning city. His eyes were wide and dry. He was not crying anymore. He was filled with a cold rage. He swore he would kill them all. He would kill every single titan. But in his mind he also saw the man in red. He saw the power that man had. He hated the titans, but he envied that man. He wanted that strength. He wanted to be the monster that other monsters feared. The boat drifted down the river. The sun was setting. The sky was the color of a bruise. The refugees were crying. They had lost their homes. They had lost their families. They were packed together like cattle. The smell of sweat and fear was heavy. On the last boat leaving the city, the man in red sat at the back. He sat alone. The people around him gave him space. They were terrified of him. They had seen what he did. They whispered that he was a demon. They whispered that he was worse than a titan. The man did not listen. He looked at the water. He was thinking about this world. There was no sun that burned him here. The day was safe, but the blood was useless. He felt a dull hunger starting in his gut. It was not urgent yet. He had eaten well before he came here. He had millions of souls inside him, but he could not replenish them here. If he used his power too much, he would fade. He needed a source. He looked at the soldiers on the boat. They held their rifles tight. They looked weak, but they had blood. The man smiled. He would find a way. He would find the leader of these soldiers. He would make a deal. He leaned back against the wooden rail. He pulled his hat down over his eyes. He decided to sleep for a while. The boat carried him deeper into the human territory. The wolf was now inside the sheep pen, and the sheep were too busy worrying about the wolves outside to notice the one sitting right next to them. The journey took days. The refugees were dropped off in warehouses and open fields. Food was scarce. People fought over bread. Disease started to spread. The man in red did not eat the bread. He did not get sick. He walked away from the camps. He walked toward the interior. He walked toward the capital. He knew that is where the power was. He knew that is where the strongest humans would be. He walked on the roads at night. He saw the military police. They were lazy and corrupt. He saw the garrison. They were tired and scared. Then he saw a different symbol. He saw a green cloak with wings on it. He saw soldiers riding horses with purpose. They looked different. They looked like they had seen death and accepted it. One of them rode past him. It was a short man with dark hair and cold eyes. He looked at the man in red. The man in red looked back. For a second their eyes met. The soldier on the horse did not look away. He did not look scared. He looked suspicious. The man in red smiled. He liked that. He watched the soldier ride away. He decided to follow that symbol. The wings of freedom. It seemed like a good joke. A monster fighting for freedom. He laughed into the night air. He continued his walk. He was going to join the war, not to save humanity, but because it seemed like a wonderful way to kill time. The government declared the loss of Wall Maria. 1/3 of the population was forced into the remaining lands. A year later, they announced a mission to retake the wall. It was a lie. It was a cull. They sent 250,000 people to fight the Titans. They gave them pitchforks and old guns. They sent them to die so the rest could eat. The man in red did not go. He watched them leave. He stood on a hill and watched the long lines of doomed people. He saw the cruelty of the human leaders. He respected it. It was pragmatic. It was cold. It was the law of the jungle. The weak die, so the strong survive. Among the people left behind were the children. Eren Yeager, Mikasa Ackerman, Armin Arlet. They joined the military training corps. They wanted to fight. The man in red watched them from a distance. He saw the fire in the boy's eyes. He saw the cold skill in the girl. He saw the brain in the blonde one. He marked them. He would watch them grow. He would see if they became warriors or food. In the shadows of the capital, the man in red found a basement. It was under an abandoned church. It was dark and damp. It reminded him of home. He made it his lair. He went out at night. He found criminals, killers, rapists, the scum of the city. He did not save them. He ate them. He drank their blood. It was not great blood. It tasted of gin and grease, but it sustained him. It kept the hunger away. He learned the language better. He learned the history. He learned about the walls and the king. He realized the king was hiding something. The whole world felt like a cage built by a coward. This angered him. He hated cowards. He decided he would break the cage, but he needed a key. He needed a human who had the will to use him. He waited. He waited for the graduation of the 104th Training Corps. He knew the war would start again then. He checked his guns. He polished the silver. He waited for the curtain to rise. The intermission was over. The nightmare was about to begin again. The air above Trost district tasted of sulphur and cheap ale. It was the night of the graduation ceremony for the 104th Training Corps. Inside the mess hall, the cadets were drinking and boasting about which regiment they would join. They spoke of the military police and the safety of the interior. They spoke of the garrison and the easy life on the walls. Only a few spoke of the Survey Corps, and they spoke quietly. Outside the hall, the streets were dark and silent, but on top of the highest church spire, a figure sat perched like a gargoyle. Alucard had not aged a day in 5 years. His red coat was pristine. His guns were loaded. He was watching the moon. He was bored. The last 5 years had been a slow drip of dull hunger. He had fed on the rats of the capital and the corrupt officials who thought their money could save them. It was not enough. He missed the war. He missed the smell of a battlefield where death was not a tragedy but a currency. He heard footsteps climbing the stone stairs inside the spire. He did not turn around. He knew the heartbeat. It was calm, too calm for a human climbing toward a monster. The trapdoor opened, and a man stepped out onto the roof. It was Commander Irwin Smith. He wore the green cloak of the Survey Corps. He did not draw his blade. He walked to the edge of the roof and stood next to the vampire. Irwin did not look at Alucard. He looked at the city below. He spoke clearly. He said that he had spent years tracking the rumors of the Red Ghost. He said he had found piles of ash in the shape of men in the alleyways of Mitras. He said he knew what happened in Shiganshina 5 years ago. Alucard smiled. He liked this one. This one had a mind that was cold and sharp like a scalpel. Alucard asked the human what he wanted. Did he want to arrest him? Did he want to kill him? Irwin shook his head. He said he wanted to win. He said humanity was losing a slow war of attrition. He said he needed a weapon that did not break. He offered Alucard a position, not as a soldier, but as a specialist. Alucard laughed. The sound echoed over the sleeping city. He asked why he should serve a species that was food. Irwin looked him in the eye. He said that if humanity died, there would be no more food. He said that if Alucard wanted a war, he could give him the biggest war the world had ever seen. Alucard stopped laughing. He adjusted his glasses. He said he would watch. He said he would see if Irwin was a worthy master or just another meal. The next morning, the sun rose hot and bright. The cadets were on the wall of Trost doing maintenance. They were cleaning the cannons. Eren Yeager was there. He was looking at the horizon. He was talking about killing titans. He was talking about freedom. Alucard was there too. He was leaning against a cannon housing in the shade. The cadets gave him a wide berth. They did not know who he was, but their instincts told them to stay away. He was wearing the uniform of the Survey Corps, but he had refused to wear the straps or the gear. He kept his coat. He kept his guns. Sasha Blau stared at him. She whispered that he smelled like a slaughterhouse. Suddenly the lightning struck. It was yellow and violent. It hit the ground just outside the gate. The shockwave knocked the cadets off their feet. Steam hissed and boiled. A massive hand grabbed the top of the wall. It was skinless and red. The colossal titan had returned. The cadets screamed. They were paralyzed. The heat from the titan was burning their skin. The monster raised its leg and kicked the gate. The stone exploded. The wind from the impact sent bodies flying. Eren Yeager did not fly. He anchored himself. He screamed and launched his hook into the titan's flesh. He swung up toward the head. He was going to kill it. Alucard watched him go. He did not move. He did not help. He wanted to see what the boy could do. Eren reached the top of the wall. He slashed at the neck, but the titan released a burst of steam, so hot it melted the hooks. Eren fell back. The titan vanished, just like 5 years ago. The hole in the wall remained. The titans down below began to walk in. The nightmare had restarted. The bell rang. The evacuation order was given. The cadets were sent to the middle guard. They were terrified. They were shaking. Alucard walked down the wall. He walked past the panicked officers. He walked toward the vanguard. He hummed a tune. He jumped off the wall. He did not use gear. He fell 50 meters and landed on his feet in the middle of the street. The pavement cracked under his boots. A 10-meter titan was already there. It was reaching for a soldier who had broken his leg. Alucard walked up to the titan. He tapped the barrel of the jackal against the titan's ankle. The titan looked down. Alucard smiled. He fired. The bullet blew the leg off at the knee. The titan fell. Alucard walked up to its face. He put the gun in its eye. He fired again. The head exploded. The soldier on the ground stared at him. He begged for help. Alucard looked at the soldier. He asked the soldier if he wanted to live. The soldier nodded, crying. Alucard asked why. The soldier stammered. He said he didn't want to die. Alucard sneered. He said that was not a reason. That was just fear. He left the soldier there and walked away. The battle turned into a slaughter. The gas supply team was stuck in the headquarters. The cadets in the city were running out of gas. They were trapped on rooftops. They watched their friends get eaten. Jean Kirstein was leading a group. He was trying to keep them calm. He saw a titan grab a girl named Mina. He saw the titan bite her head off. John froze. He could not move. A shadow passed over him. Alucard landed on the roof. He looked at the titans feasting in the street. He looked at the cadets huddled on the tiles. He shouted at them. He called them cattle. He asked if they were waiting for the farmer to come and feed them. He pointed his gun at the titans. He started shooting. He did not shoot to kill immediately. He shot off arms. He shot off jaws. He made the titan suffer. He made a game of it. He wanted to provoke the humans. He wanted them to fight. In another part of the city, Eren was missing. Armin Arled was screaming. He had seen Eren get eaten. He had seen Eren save his life and then get swallowed whole by a bearded titan. Armin was sitting on a roof, paralyzed by grief. Mikasa Ackerman arrived. She asked where Eren was. Armin could not speak. He just cried. Mikasa understood. Her face went cold. She turned to the titans. She drew her blades. She ran. She ran so fast she blurred. She killed a titan. Then another, then another. She was using too much gas. She was going to crash. Alucard was watching from a clock tower. He saw the girl. He saw the darkness in her. He felt a kinship. She was a killer. She did not fight for glory. She fought because the world was cruel. Her gas ran out. She fell into an alleyway. A titan approached her. Alucard raised his gun. He could save her easily, but he hesitated. He wanted to see if she would give up. Mikasa stood up. She raised a broken blade. She looked the Titan in the eye. She shouted. She said the world was beautiful and cruel. She prepared to fight to the death. Alucard lowered his gun. He nodded. She passed the test. But before Mikasa could strike, a roar shook the city. It was not a normal Titan roar. It was a scream of pure rage. A 15-meter Titan burst from around the corner. It had long hair and pointed ears. It did not look at Mikasa. It punched the Titan that was threatening her. The punch was so hard it took the other Titan's head off. The new Titan stomped on the body. It crushed the nape. It roared again. It turned and attacked another Titan. Mikasa was confused. Titans did not kill Titans. This was impossible. Alucard leaned forward on the clock tower. His eyes widened behind his orange glasses. He smelled it. Inside that monster was a human soul. A soul burning with so much hate it had transcended death. Alucard laughed. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off the tower. This was it. This was the surprise he had been waiting for. A human who refused to die so badly. He became a monster. Alucard dissolved into bats and reformed on the roof next to Mikasa and Armin. They flinched. They were terrified of him. He pointed at the rogue Titan. He told them to watch. He told them that was their friend. Armin looked at the Titan. He saw the green eyes. He realized Alucard was right. It was Eren. The rogue Titan was tearing through the city. It was fighting with a savage brutality. It lost its arms. It bit the napes of other Titans. It was running on pure adrenaline. It was burning itself out. Finally, the rogue Titan collapsed. The steam poured off it. The body began to disintegrate. From the nape of the neck, a human figure emerged. It was Eren. He was unconscious. His limbs were intact. Mikasa ran to him. She hugged him. She cried. Alucard walked over. He looked at the boy. He felt the power radiating off him. It was familiar. It was the power of the founding. But it was mixed with something else. Something angry. The garrison soldiers arrived. They saw Eren emerge from the Titan. They surrounded the cadets. They pointed their rifles. The captain was a man named Kit's Wheelman. He was sweating. He was terrified. He shouted that Eren was a monster. He shouted that he had to die. He ordered the cannons to be loaded. Mikasa stood in front of Eren. She raised her blades. She said she would kill anyone who touched him. Wildman screamed fire. The cannon fired. A grape-shot shell meant to shred infantry. Time seemed to slow down. Eren woke up. He saw the shell coming. He bit his hand. Lightning struck again. A partial Titan skeleton formed around them. It was a rib cage of muscle and bone. It blocked the cannonball. The smoke cleared. The soldiers gasped. A monster had protected them. Alucard was standing outside the skeleton. The cannonball had not hit him. He had caught a piece of shrapnel in his teeth. He spit it out. He walked through the steam toward Wheelman. The soldiers pointed their guns at him. Alucard ignored them. He walked right up to the captain. He towered over him. He asked the captain if he was a man or a dog. The captain shook. He threatened to shoot Alucard. Alucard grabbed the barrel of the captain's rifle. He bent it upward with one hand. The metal creaked and twisted. Alucard leaned down. He whispered that true monsters were not made of flesh and bone. They were made of fear. And the captain was the ugliest monster here. Before the situation could explode, Commander Pixis arrived. He stopped the execution. He saw the potential. He saw the weapon. Pixis took Eren to the top of the wall. He asked if Eren could seal the gate. Eren said he would try. The plan was made. Eren would transform and carry a giant boulder to plug the hole. The cadets would defend him. Alucard was given a special order. He was to ensure the operation succeeded. He was the fail-safe. If Eren failed, Alucard was to kill everyone and seal the gate himself with the bodies of the Titans if necessary. The operation began. Eren transformed, but he lost control. He attacked Mikasa. He sat on the ground and did nothing. The mission was failing. The Titans were swarming. The cadets were dying to protect a Titan that was not moving. Elite soldiers were being eaten. Ian Dietrich was decapitated. Mitabi Jarnak was crushed. Alucard stood on a roof nearby. He was cleaning his fingernails. He was waiting. He would not help until they were desperate. He wanted to see if Armin could bring the boy back. Armin stabbed his blade into Eren's Titan neck. He screamed at him. He woke him up. Eren roared. He stood up. He grabbed the boulder. It was heavier than the world. He carried it. He walked toward the gate. The Titans swarmed him. They ignored the soldiers. They went for Eren. They sensed the threat. There were too many. The soldiers were out of gas. They could not stop them all. A group of 5 Titans blocked the path. Eren could not stop or he would be crushed. Mikasa was out of blades. It looked like the end. Then the street turned red. Alucard released his restraint level, just a fraction. The shadows under the 5 Titans erupted. Spikes of darkness impaled them. The spikes lifted the 15-meter monsters into the air like shish kebabs. The Titans thrashed and screamed. Alucard walked under the suspended monsters. He fired the jackal 5 times. 5 heads exploded in unison. The bodies turned to dust and rained down on Eren as he walked past. Eren looked down at the man in red. Alucard waved him forward. He told the boy to run. He told the boy to be a good little monster. Eren slammed the boulder into the gate. The crash shook the whole district. The hole was sealed. The humans had won. For the first time in history, humanity had taken back territory from the Titans. But the cost was high. And the savior was not just a boy. It was something much darker. The aftermath was not a celebration. It was a purge. Eren was thrown into a dungeon. He was chained to the floor. He was treated like a rabid animal. Levi Ackerman of the Survey Corps came to see him. Levi looked at Eren with disgust but also interest. Alucard was there too. He was leaning against the cold stone wall of the cell. Levi looked at Alucard. He asked who let the dog in. Alucard smiled. He said he was not the dog. He was the owner of the kennel. Levi scoffed. He said he didn't like tall bastards. He said he would kick Alucard's teeth in if he got in the way. Alucard's eyes glowed. He said he would love to see him try. The tension in the cell was thicker than the chains. 2 apex predators circling each other. Irvin stepped between them. He said they had a trial to attend. The tribunal was held in the capital. The room was packed. The military police were on one side, the Survey Corps on the other. Darius Zackley sat as the judge. The MPs wanted to dissect Eren. They said he was a threat. They said he was a spy. The wall cult priest, Pastor Nick, was screaming that Eren was an abomination. Mikasa and Armin were on the witness stand. They were accused of being Titans too. The MP commander Niall Dork ordered his men to aim their guns at the children. He was going to execute them right there in the court. The fear was ruling the room. Levi beat Eren. He kicked him in the face. He broke his tooth. He showed them that Eren could be controlled, but the MPs were not convinced. They wanted blood. Niall Dog raised his hand to give the order to fire. Suddenly, the lights in the courtroom went out. All of them. The room was pitch black. A cold wind blew through the chamber. It smelled of blood. 2 red eyes appeared in the darkness above the judge's bench. A voice spoke. It did not come from a mouth. It came from the walls. It came from the floor. It said that this court was a farce. It said that there were children playing with guns. The lights flickered back on. Alucard was standing in the center of the room. He was not standing on the floor. He was floating an inch above it. The shadows from his coat were stretching out and touching the boots of every MP in the room. He looked at Niall Dork. He asked Niall if he really thought his little musket could kill a monster. Alucard reached into his coat and pulled out the jackal. He placed it on the table in front of Zachary. The gun was heavy. It cracked the wood. Alucard spoke to the room. He said that Eren Yeager belonged to him. He said that the Survey Corps had made a deal with the devil. He pointed at Erwin. He said Erwin had sold his soul for victory. He said that if the MPs wanted Eren, they would have to go through him first. He smiled. He said he hoped they would try. He said he was very hungry. The threat was absolute. The room was silent. No one moved. Even Levi looked cautious. Zachary looked at the gun. He looked at the vampire. He looked at Eren. He made his decision. He gave custody of Eren to the Survey Corps. He included a condition. Alucard would also be placed under the supervision of the Survey Corps, specifically under Captain Levy. If Eren lost control, Alucard would kill him. If Alucard lost control, Levi would kill him. It was a suicide pact. Alucard laughed. He picked up his gun. He walked over to Eren, who was bleeding and bruised. He patted the boy on the head. He told him that life was about to get very interesting. He told him that now he was a soldier in the army of the damned. The Survey Corps leaving the capital. They took Eren to the old castle headquarters. Alucard rode in the wagon with them. He did not ride a horse. Horses panicked near him. He sat in the back of the wagon watching the trees pass by. He was thinking about the basement Eren had talked about. He was thinking about the walls. He sensed something inside the walls, literally inside the stone. He had felt it when he touched the wall in Trost. The walls were alive. They were made of titans, millions of them, sleeping, waiting. Alucard smiled. The scale of this tragedy was magnificent. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. He was content. The game was just beginning. The wheels of the supply wagons creaked under the weight of the expedition. The 57th expedition. Outside the walls was a desperate gamble, and everyone knew it. The air was thick with the humidity of late summer and the smell of horse sweat. Alucard sat in the back of a covered wagon near the center of the formation. He was not riding. Horses were terrified of him. If he tried to mount one, the animal would froth at the mouth and collapse from heart failure. So he sat in the dark enclosure of the canvas, listening to the rhythmic thud of hooves and the nervous breathing of the soldiers around him. Section Commander Hunger Zoe was sitting opposite him. Her eyes were wide and manic behind her goggles. She was holding a sketchbook. She had been asking him questions for 3 hours. She wanted to know about his blood. She wanted to know if he had a heart. She wanted to know if he could turn into a titan. Alucard found her amusing. She was like the mad doctors he had known in the past, but without the cruelty. She was driven by a pure chaotic need to know. He answered her with riddles. He told her he was the bird of Hermes eating his own wings. She scribbled it down furiously, as if it were a scientific formula. The formation spread out as they entered the open plains. The tall grass swayed in the wind, hiding the uneven ground. The system Commander Erwin had devised was based on communication. Red smoke flares signaled a titan. Green smoke signaled a change in course. It was a strategy of avoidance. Alucard thought it was boring. He preferred a straight line. He preferred a pile of bodies. But he had agreed to play by Erwin's rules for now. He respected the commander, Owen Smith had the soul of a gambler who cheats at cards and dares you to shoot him. Alucard liked that. He sensed the vibrations in the ground before anyone else. It was not the heavy stumble of the mindless titans. It was a sharp, precise impact. Someone was running, someone heavy. A black smoke flare rose from the right flank. That was the signal for an abnormal. A titan that did not behave normally. Then another black flare. Then a purple one. An emergency. The line was breaking. Alucard tilted his head. He smelled it. The scent was faint but distinct. It was the smell of a female. Not a human female and not a titan. It was something in between. It smelled like wet clay and crystal. He opened the back flap of the wagon and looked out. In the distance, a cloud of dust was rising. Soldiers were flying through the air like broken toys. A titan was running through the formation. She was 14 meters tall with skinless muscles and blonde hair. She moved with the grace of a martial artist. She was not eating people. She was killing them because they were in her way. She was swatting them out of the air. She was grabbing their wires and spinning them into the ground. It was efficient. It was trained. Armin Arled was on the right flank. He saw the female titan approaching. He saw her kill his seniors. He saw her look at his face. She did not kill him. She lifted his hood, checked his identity, and left him. Armin was shaking. He realized the truth. This was a human, just like Eren. He fired a black smoke signal. John and Reiner joined him. They tried to engage her. They failed. She was too fast. She covered her nape. She knew the weaknesses. She was a soldier. Alucard watched the chaos from the center. He saw the red flares bending the formation toward the forest of giant trees. He understood Erwin's plan instantly. The open field was a disadvantage. The forest was a cage. Erwin was luring the wolf into a trap. Alucard smiled. He tapped the driver of the wagon on the shoulder. He told him to drive faster. He said the show was about to start. The wagon entered the shadow of the giant trees. The trunks were as wide as castles. The branches interlocked high above, blocking out the sun. The air was cool and damp. It was a perfect hunting ground. The center rank, including the wagon and Levi squad, moved into the forest. The rest of the soldiers were ordered to guard the perimeter. They did not know why. They were terrified. They stood on the branches and waited for death. Inside the forest, the female titan was close. She was running behind Levi's squad. Eren was panicking. He wanted to fight. He wanted to transform. Levi told him to choose. Believe in himself or believe in his comrades. Petra, Oluo, Eld, and Gunther told him to trust them. They begged him to keep moving. Eren looked at the monster behind them. He looked at the speed. He looked at the death. He chose to trust. Alucard was gone from the wagon. He had slipped into the shadows of the trees. He moved through the canopy like a ghost. He watched the chase. He saw the female titan gain ground. She was fast. She was relentless. Then the trap sprang. Hundreds of harpoon traps fired from the darkness. The steel cables pierced the female titan's skin. They locked her joints. They pinned her to the ground. She roared. It was a sound of frustration. Erwin stepped out onto a branch. He looked down at his catch. Levi descended. He stood on the titan's head. He mocked her. He threatened to cut off her limbs. He was cold and cruel. He was enjoying the reversal of power. Alucard materialized on a branch opposite Erwin. He leaned against the trunk, his arms crossed. He watched. He was curious. How would the mouse escape the trap? Levi and Mike attacked. They tried to cut the nape, but her skin turned to diamond. The blades shattered. It was hardening. A defensive ability. Levi was annoyed. He realized that they could not cut her out. Erwin ordered the explosives. They were going to blow her hands off. The female titan stopped struggling. She went still. Then she screamed. It was not a roar. It was a high-pitched shriek that pierced the eardrums. It echoed through the forest. It traveled for miles. The birds flew away. The air vibrated. Alucard winced. He covered his ears. He hated loud noises. He looked at the perimeter of the forest. The ground was shaking. The titans outside the forest, the mindless ones, were ignoring the humans. They were running toward the scream. They were running toward the female titan. Hundreds of titans poured into the forest. They were frenzied. They were sprinting. They ignored the soldiers on the trees. They ran straight for the trap. They jumped on the female titan. They began to eat her. They tore at her flesh. Erwin realized what was happening. She was destroying the evidence. She was sacrificing her titan body to escape. He ordered the soldiers to kill the incoming titans. It was impossible. There were too many. It was a tidal wave of meat. Levi had to retreat. The female titan was consumed. The steam was blinding. In the confusion, a figure wearing a Survey Corps cloak used the steam to escape. It was the pilot. She was loose in the forest. Alucard stood on a high branch. He looked down at the swarm of titans devouring the carcass. He looked at the soldiers struggling to hold them back. He felt the hunger. It had been building since Trost. He needed to release the pressure. He looked at Erwin. Erwin was retreating. He was ordering a withdrawal. The mission was a failure. They had lost the target and lost the resources. Alucard decided to change the equation. He did not care about the capture. He cared about the fear. He dropped from the branch. He fell 200 feet. He landed in the middle of the swarm of titans. The titans stopped eating the carcass. They smelled the intruder. They turned toward the man in red. There were 30 of them in the immediate circle. Hundreds more approaching. Alucard smiled. His mouth opened too wide. His jaw unhinged. The darkness poured out of him. It was not just shadow. It was a physical substance. It covered the ground like tar. Red eyes opened in the tar. The Baskerville dog emerged. It was not one dog this time. It was a pack. Massive, shapeless hounds made of blood and hate lunged at the titans. The forest turned into a slaughterhouse. The hounds tore the throats out of the titans. They ripped off limbs. Alucard stood in the center firing his guns. The jackal roared like a cannon. One shot, one head gone. 2 shots, 2 heads gone. He was spinning. He was dancing. He was laughing. The soldiers on the trees stopped retreating. They stared. They had never seen anything like this. They were watching a massacre, but the humans were not the ones dying. The monsters were being eaten by a bigger monster. Alucard was culling the herd. He was clearing the board, but while he played his game, the real threat was moving elsewhere. The pilot of the female titan, Annie Leonhardt, had killed Gunther. She had transformed again. She was hunting Levi's squad. Deep in the forest away from Alucard's carnage, Levi's squad engaged the female titan. They were elite. They were the best. They moved in perfect synchronization. They blinded her. They cut her muscles. They crippled her arms. And they were winning. Eren watched as he rode away. He was amazed. He thought they could do it. He thought they didn't need him. He was wrong. Annie had one eye open. She focused her power. She prioritized regeneration. She healed one eye faster than they expected. She bit Eld in half. The coordination broke. Petra froze. She was terrified. Annie stomped her into a tree. The sound of Petra's spine breaking was sickeningly loud. Oluo tried to strike the nape. Annie hardened her neck. The blade broke. She kicked him. He died instantly. Eren heard the sounds. He looked back. He saw the broken bodies of his friends. The rage took him. It was a white-hot fire. He screamed. He bit his hand. The lightning struck. The attack titan formed. Eren charged the female titan. It was a brawl, a street fight. Eren was stronger than before, but he was sloppy. He was driven by hate. Annie was driven by technique. She dismantled him. She kicked his head off. She exposed his human body. She bit through the nape. She held Eren in her mouth. She did not swallow. She kept him on her tongue. She began to run. She had the prize. Levi arrived at the scene of the slaughter. He saw his squad. He saw Petra's body. His face did not change. His eyes did not waver, but his grip on his blades tightened until the metal groaned. He saw Mikasa chasing the female titan. She was reckless. She was wasting gas. Levi caught up to her. He took command. He told her to keep her distance. He told her they would retrieve Eren, but they had to be smart. They chased the female titan to the edge of the forest. Alucard had finished his meal. The clearing was silent. 50 titan carcasses were steaming on the ground. The black dogs melted back into his coat. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at his white gloves. They were stained red. He sighed. He heard the sound of the fight in the distance. He knew he was late. He had gotten distracted. He began to run. He did not use the trees. He ran on the ground. He ran faster than a horse. He moved like a red blur through the undergrowth. He reached the edge of the forest just as Levi and Mikasa were engaging Annie. Levi was a whirlwind. He was too fast for Annie to track. He was cutting her muscles, disabling her jaw, slicing her eyes. He was dissecting her alive. Mikasa saw an opening. She went for the kill. It was a mistake. Annie had a free hand. She swiped at Mikasa. Levi shoved Mikasa out of the way, but in doing so, he put weight on his injured leg. The bone snapped. Levi winced, but he didn't stop. He spun. He slashed Annie's mouth. The jaw muscles were cut. The mouth fell open. Eren was revealed. Levi grabbed Eren. He pulled him out of the saliva. He grabbed Mikasa. He retreated. They had the boy. Annie sat against a tree. She was beaten. She was blind. She was armless. She was crying. Tears mixed with the blood on her face. She was a failure. She waited for the killing blow. She waited for Levi to come back and finish it. But Levi was gone. Instead, she heard footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps. She sensed the presence that made her titan instincts scream in terror. She tried to harden her skin, but she was exhausted. She could not move. Alucard walked into the clearing. He saw the battered female titan. He saw the tears. He walked up to her giant face. He looked into her empty eye sockets. He poked her cheek with the barrel of his gun. He whispered to her. He asked her if she was crying for her lost comrades or for her own failure. He asked her what it felt like to be the prey. Annie couldn't answer. She was trapped in the steaming meat. Alucard cocked the hammer of the jackal. He aimed at her nape. He could end it right here. He could kill the spy. He could uncover the human inside and eat them. It would be so easy. But he stopped. He heard the retreating horses. He heard the order to fall back. If he killed her now, he would have to carry the body back himself. And he was not a pack mule. Besides, the game was more fun when the enemy had a face. He wanted to see what she would do next. He wanted to see how long she could hide. He lowered the gun. He patted the titan on the nose. He told her to run along home. He told her he would see her soon. Then he turned into a swarm of bats and flew after the survey corps. Annie was left alone, confused, terrified, alive. The return trip was a funeral procession. The wagons were filled with the dead, but not all the dead. They had to dump bodies to outrun the titans on the plains. Levi watched them throw Petra's body out of the wagon to lighten the load. His expression was stone. Alucard sat next to him. Alucard did not offer sympathy. He offered a cigarette. Levi looked at the cigarette. He took it. He didn't light it. He just held it. He asked Alucard why he didn't kill the female Titan. Alucard smiled. He said that sometimes the threat of death is more effective than death itself. He said that now she knew she was not the apex predator. Now she would make mistakes. Levi didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon. He knew Alucard was right, but he hated it. They reached the gate of the district. The civilians were cheering. They thought it was a victory. Then they saw the faces of the soldiers. The cheering died. They saw the few wagons. They saw the injuries. A man walked up to Levi. It was Petra's father. He was smiling. He asked where his daughter was. He said she had written a letter saying she was going to dedicate herself to Captain Levy. Levi stopped. He looked at the man. He couldn't speak. The weight of the failure crashed down on him. Alucard watched from the shadows of the gate. He saw the pain. He saw the humiliation. This was the taste of defeat. It was bitter. It was necessary. Eren woke up in the wagon. He saw Mikasa. He saw Levi's broken leg. He remembered the squad. He remembered their deaths. He started to cry. It was a silent weeping. The tears carved tracks through the dust on his face. He had trusted them, and they had died. He had chosen the wrong path. He looked at Alucard, who was leaning against the wall of the gate cleaning his gun. Alucard looked back. The vampire's eyes were glowing behind the orange tint. He spoke into Eren's mind. He didn't move his lips, but Eren heard the voice. It was deep and echoing. "Do not cry, little monster," the voice said. "Tears are for the living. You are a weapon now. Weapons do not weep. They break things. Next time, do not choose. Do not trust. Just kill. Kill them all until there is no one left to kill. That is the only way to be free." Eren stared at him. The words burned into his brain. He stopped crying. His eyes hardened. The sadness was replaced by a cold void. He nodded slowly. The boy died in that wagon. The monster was truly born. The expedition ended in disgrace. The Survey Corps was summoned to the capital. They were to hand over Eren Yeager. The government had had enough. The gamble had failed. Irvin Smith was to be put on trial. The scouts were to be disbanded. It was the end of the line. But in the barracks inside Walsinner, Armin Arlert was thinking. He was looking at a map. He was looking at the reports. He remembered the female Titan's face. He remembered who didn't show up for inspection. He connected the dots. He found the ring. Armin went to Irvin. He went to Levi. He went to Alucard. He laid out his theory. The female Titan was Annie Leonhardt. She was a military police officer. She was in the interior. She was right under their noses. Irvin looked at the evidence. It was circumstantial, but it was the only card they had left. He decided to play it. They would not hand over Eren. They would use Eren as bait one last time. They would trap Annie in the Stohes district. They would fight in the streets of the capital. Alucard listened to the plan. He grinned. A battle in the city. Civilians everywhere. No room to maneuver. It would be messy. It would be chaotic. It would be perfect. He asked Irvin what the rules of engagement were. Irvin looked at him. His eyes were tired but fierce. He said there were no rules. Capture her if possible. Kill her if necessary. But under no circumstances let her escape. Alucard bowed. He said it would be a pleasure. The stage was set. The players were in position. The tragedy was about to begin. The walls that protected the humans were about to become their tomb. And in the center of it all, the no-life king waited for the dawn to break so he could bring the darkness back. The piece of the capital was a fragile glass, and Alucard was holding the hammer. The sun set over Stoes. The military police patrolled the streets, unaware that the Grim Reaper was walking among them. Annie Leonhardt walked down the street. She looked tired. She felt the eyes on her. She felt the trap closing. She didn't know how or when, but she knew it was coming. She fingered the ring on her hand. The blade hidden inside it was cold against her skin. She was ready. If the world wanted to hunt her, she would show them what a cornered wolf could do. She turned the corner and saw Armin standing there. He looked scared. He asked her for help. He asked her to be a good person. Annie smiled. It was a sad, lonely smile. She said she couldn't be a good person to him, but she would help. She walked into the trap, and the shadow of the bird of Hermes fell over the city. The tunnel entrance was cold and damp. The air smelled of mold and stagnant water. Armin Arler stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the grey light of the surface. He was sweating. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Above him, on the cobblestones of the street, Annie Leonhardt stood motionless. She was not coming down. She had seen the trap. She had seen the desperation in Armin's eyes and the hidden fear in Erin's stance. The silence stretched out until it was physically painful. Passers-by walked around them, unaware that they were standing on the fuse of a bomb that was about to level the district. Armin tried to speak. He tried to use logic. He tried to appeal to her humanity. Annie listened with a bored expression, but her eyes were darting around, scanning the rooftops and the alleyways. She was looking for the trap, but she was also looking for him. She knew the monster in red was nearby. She had felt his presence in the forest, and she felt it now. It was a pressure on the back of her neck like a cold breath. She laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She called herself a bad person. She raised her hand to her mouth. Armin shouted the signal. The disguised team dropped their baskets and revealed their flares. They fired. The acoustic shells screamed into the sky. Grappling hooks shot out from the shadows targeting Annie, but she was too fast. She had already bitten her thumb. The lightning did not come from the sky this time. It exploded outward from her body. The shockwave shattered the windows of the street. The stone pavement erupted. The soldiers who had lunged at her were blown away like leaves in a hurricane. The transformation was instantaneous. 1 second she was a girl. The next, she was the female Titan. Her foot smashed down on the tunnel entrance, collapsing the stairs. Armin and Mikasa were thrown back into the darkness. Erin was buried under the rubble. The female Titan did not stay to fight. She did not try to kill them. She ran. She sprinted through the streets of Stoes, her massive feet crushing carriages and stalls. She was heading for the wall. She knew she could not win here. Not against the scouts and the vampire. Erwin Smith watched from a balcony overlooking the plaza. His face was a mask of calm, but his knuckles were white as he gripped at the railing. The plan had failed. The capture was botched. Now it was a containment operation. He ordered the teams to engage. But before the soldiers could launch their hooks, the shadows in the plaza lengthened. It was high noon, but it looked like twilight. Alucard stepped out from behind a chimney on a roof directly in Annie's path. He did not have his guns drawn. He was holding a glass of wine that he had stolen from a nearby noble's house. He took a sip. He looked at the charging 14-meter Titan. He smiled. He tossed the wineglass into the air. As it shattered on the ground, the street in front of Annie erupted. Thousands of black spikes shot up from the cobblestones. They were not made of iron or stone. They were made of hardened shadow. Annie tried to stop, but her momentum was too great. She crashed into the forest of spikes. They pierced her feet and her shins. She roared in pain and fell forward. She hardened her arms to protect her face as she slid across the pavement, destroying a row of shops. She scrambled to get up, but the shadows wrapped around her ankles like tar. She slashed at them with her hardened hands, but they were liquid. They reformed instantly. Alucard laughed. His voice echoed through the terrified city. He asked her where she was running to. He asked her if she thought the game was over just because she changed her shape. He jumped from the roof and landed on her shoulder. He whispered in her ear. He told her that in his world little girls who played with monsters got eaten. Annie swatted at her shoulder, but Alucard dissolved into mist and reformed on the ground in front of her. She screamed and stomped on him. Her foot crushed the pavement into dust. But when she lifted her foot, Alucard was gone. He was standing 10 meters away, dusting off his coat. He drew the jackal. The silver gun shined in the sun. He fired. The bullet hit Annie's knee. It was not a normal bullet. It was an explosive round. It blew the hardened skin off her joint. She stumbled. The soldiers of the Survey Corps arrived. Hanger Zoe led the charge. They fired their thunder spears. The new weapons exploded against Annie's skin. She was being overwhelmed, but she was a warrior. She hardened her fingers into claws. She spun around, decapping 2 soldiers who got too close. She kicked a building, sending debris flying into the support teams. She was fighting like a cornered rat, vicious and unpredictable. Under the ground, Eren was screaming. A piece of timber had pierced his chest. He was bleeding. He was trapped. Mikasa was trying to dig him out. Armin was yelling at him to transform. But Eren couldn't do it. He was hesitating. He still couldn't believe that Annie was the enemy. He remembered their training. He remembered her teaching him how to fight. He couldn't accept that it was all a lie. Above him, the sounds of the city dying were loud. He heard the screams of the civilians. He heard the roar of the female Titan. And he heard the laughter of Alucard. That laughter cut through his hesitation. It mocked him. It told him that while he was crying about betrayal, the real monsters were doing the work. Eren felt a surge of self-loathing. He hated himself for being weak. He hated Annie for being a traitor. He hated Alucard for being right. The hate boiled over. He bit his hand. He didn't just bite it. He tore the flesh from his bones. The ground in the plaza exploded upwards. The attack titan rose from the earth. Eren did not roar. He lunged. He hit Annie with the force of a freight train. The impact sent them both crashing through a church. The stone walls crumbled. The believers inside were crushed. The 2 titans rolled into the street, punching and kicking. It was not a duel of skill. It was a brawl. Eren was insane with rage. He was biting her. He was clawing at her face. Annie tried to use her techniques, but Eren was too close. He was overwhelming her with sheer violence. Alucard watched from the steeple of the ruined church. He clapped his hands slowly. He enjoyed the brutality. He liked seeing the boy embrace the beast. This was war. No elegance. Just blood and dirt. The fight spilled into the noble district. The mansions were trampled. The wealthy citizens who thought the walls kept them safe were flattened by the protectors they despised. Niall Dock, the commander of the military police, was watching from his headquarters. He was horrified. This was his district. These were his people. The Survey Corps had brought war to the capital. He ordered his men to deploy. He ordered them to stop the Titans. He didn't care which one. He wanted them both dead. The MPs were not trained for this. They had shiny muskets and clean uniforms. They fired at the Titans from the rooftops. The bullets did nothing. Annie ignored them. Eren ignored them. But Alucard did not ignore them. Alucard saw the MPs firing on Eren. He saw them interfering with the hunt. He frowned. He dropped from the steeple. He landed in the middle of a squad of MPs. They froze. They looked at the tall man in the red coat. They had heard rumors, but they had never seen him. Alucard asked them politely to stop interrupting. The squad leader, a man with a handlebar moustache, pointed his gun at Alucard. He shouted that Alucard was under arrest. He fired. The bullet hit Alucard in the forehead. Alucard's head snapped back. The MPs cheered. They thought they had killed him. Then Alucard's head snapped forward again. The hole in his forehead closed. The bullet was pushed out of his skin and fell to the ground with a tinkling sound. Alucard smiled. His face split open. He asked them if that was the best they could do. He drew the casul, the white gun. He fired. The squad leader's head vanished. The other MPs screamed and ran. Alucard shot them in the backs. He didn't miss. He walked through the smoke humming a funeral march. In the center of the district, the Titan fight was reaching its climax. Eren had Annie pinned. He was ripping her arms off. She was screaming. She kicked him off and tried to climb the wall. She hardened her fingers and dug them into the stone. She was escaping. Mikasa flew up. She cut Annie's fingers. Annie fell. But as she fell, she kicked the wall. A massive chunk of the stone facing broke off. The sun hit the exposed inner layer. The dust cleared. And there it was. A face. A Titan's face inside the wall. It was huge. It was sleeping. Its eye was closed, but the sunlight was hitting the eyelid. It began to twitch. The battlefield fell silent. Eren stopped punching Annie. The soldiers stopped flying. Everyone looked at the wall. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The walls were Titans. The cage was made of monsters. Pastor Nick of the Wall cult was on the ground near the evacuation zone. He saw the face. He screamed. He screamed for someone to cover it. He screamed that the sunlight would wake it up. Hangazoe heard him. She looked at the wall. She looked at the priest. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in her mind. But the silence was broken by Nil Dork. He had arrived with the main force of the military police. He saw the destruction of his city. He saw the Titan in the wall. He saw the Survey Corps standing amidst the ruin. He snapped. His mind couldn't handle the paradigm shift. He decided to restore order the only way he knew how, by eliminating the anomaly. He pointed his sword at Erwin Smith, who was standing on a roof nearby. He ordered his men to arrest the Survey Corps commander. He declared the Survey Corps to be traitors who had conspired with the Titans to destroy the capital. He ordered the cannons to be aimed at Eren and the breach in the wall. He wanted to destroy everything and bury the truth. Erwin looked at Nile. He didn't raise his hands. He looked tired. He tried to explain. He tried to tell Neil that they had to cover the wall, but Nile wouldn't listen. The fear had taken him. He screamed fire. The MPs hesitated. They were looking at the wall Titan. Nile grabbed a rifle from a subordinate and aimed it at Erwin. This was the small choice. A man driven by fear choosing to cling to a crumbling authority rather than face a terrifying reality. Nile pulled the trigger. The bullet never reached Erwin. A gloved hand caught it in midair. Alucard was standing in front of Erwin. He held the bullet between his thumb and forefinger. He looked at Nile. He looked at the trembling MPs. He looked at the wall Titan. He sighed. He crushed the lead bullet into powder. He turned to Erwin. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. He said that he was tired of these interruptions. He said that the humans were trying to kill the only people who could save them. He asked Erwin for permission. Permission to release Control Art Restriction System to Level 1. Erwin looked at the MPs. He looked at the wall Titan that was starting to stir. He looked at the government officials who were watching from their safe balconies. He realized that politics had failed. The time for talk was over. Erwin nodded. Alucard smiled. It was a smile that went from ear to ear, a smile of pure, unadulterated horror. He crossed his arms over his chest. He chanted the incantation. I am the bird of Hermes. Here is my stand, eating my own wings, to keep me tame. The air in Stoes turned red. The shadows detached themselves from the buildings. The ground became a lake of blood. The MPs started to scream. Eyes opened in the blood. Millions of eyes. The souls of the dead. The Wallachian army. The Ottoman janissaries. The Rio police officers. The Nazi vampires. They all rose from the blood. They were not fully formed. They were ghouls. They were phantoms. They swarmed the military police. Niall Dock watched as his men were dragged into the sea of blood. He tried to run, but a skeletal hand grabbed his ankle. He looked up and saw Alucard. Alucard was not a man anymore. He was a pillar of darkness and eyes. He was the void. Niall begged for mercy. Alucard told him that mercy was a luxury of the strong and Niall was weak. The darkness swallowed the commander of the military police. The coup had begun. It was not a political maneuver. It was a slaughter. The government forces in Stoes were decimated in minutes. The nobles watching from their balconies were not spared. The ghouls climbed the walls. They entered the houses. They ate the rich. They ate the corrupt. Alucard was cleaning house. Meanwhile, Annie had used the distraction to recover. She saw the nightmare unfolding. She saw the army of the dead. She knew she had no chance. Not against that. She looked at Eren, who was standing frozen in his Titan form watching the massacre. She looked at the wall Titan. She realized that there was no escape. She made her choice. She would not be eaten. She would not be interrogated. She curled into a ball. Her Titan body began to glow. The crystal formed rapidly. It covered her human body in a diamond-hard shell. Eren tried to stop her. He tried to bite through the crystal, but it was too hard. His teeth broke. Annie Leonhardt was gone, sealed away in a time capsule. The red fog lifted. The blood receded into Alucard's coat. The ghouls vanished. The silence returned to Stoes, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a graveyard. Half the district was rubble. The military police leadership was dead. The nobles were dead. The wall Titan was covered with a giant sheet that Hung had ordered the remaining soldiers to rig up. The sun was setting. The sky was purple and bruised. Erwin Smith stood on the roof of the police headquarters. He was technically a criminal, but there was no one left to arrest him. Alucard stood next to him. He was pristine, not a speck of dust on his coat. He lit a cigar. He offered one to Erwin. Erwin took the cigar. His hands were shaking slightly. He looked at the devastation. He looked at the pile of MP uniforms that were left behind empty of bodies. He asked Alucard if this was necessary. Alucard exhaled a plume of smoke. He said that you cannot build a new house without tearing down the old one. He said that the king would be angry. He said that the real war had just started. Erwin knew he was right. They had crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back to the old order. The Survey Corps was now the only military power left in the city that mattered. They were rebels. They were usurpers. Hunger Zoe ran up to them. She was dragging Pastor Nick. She threw the priest at Erwin's feet. She said the priest knew about the Wall Titans. She said he had been keeping the secret the whole time. Erwin looked at the priest. His eyes were cold. He didn't ask politely. He drew his sword. He told the priest that he had 10 seconds to talk, or he would give him to the vampire. Pastor Nick looked at Alucard. Alucard flashed his teeth. Nick broke. He started sobbing. He told them about the Rice family. He told them about the true king. He told them about the coordinate. The information was explosive. The king on the throne was a fake. The true power was held by a noble family in the countryside, and they had the power to control titans. Erwin looked at Alucard. He saw a glimmer of interest in the vampire's eyes. This was the challenge Alucard had been waiting for. A god, a founding power. Alucard laughed softly. He said he wanted to meet this true king. He said he wanted to see if a god bled. Eren was pulled from his titan form. He was exhausted. He was horrified by what Alucard had done. He saw the blood in the streets. He saw the empty uniforms. He walked up to Alucard. He grabbed the vampire by the lapels of his coat. He screamed at him. He called him a murderer. He said they were supposed to be the good guys. Alucard didn't blink. He looked down at the boy. He grabbed Eren's wrist and removed the hand from his coat. He leaned in close. "There are no good guys, Eren," Alucard whispered. "There are only those who eat and those who are eaten. Today we ate. Tomorrow we might be eaten. If you want to change the world, you have to be willing to wade through a river of blood. I just made the river deeper for you. You're welcome." Eren stared at him. He hated him, but he understood. The innocence was gone forever. He looked at the crystal where Annie slept. He looked at the wall. He realized that the world was much bigger and much darker than he had ever imagined. He turned away from Alucard. He walked over to Mikasa and Armin. They huddled together. 3 orphans in a city of the dead. That night the news spread. The government tried to suppress it, but the destruction was too big. The rumors flew. The Survey Corps had staged a coup. The military police had been wiped out by a demon. The walls were monsters. The people were panicked. The social order was collapsing. In the royal palace, the fake king sat on his throne trembling. Rod Rice, the true ruler, received the report in his chapel. He read about the man in red. He read about the shadows. He felt a fear he had not felt in decades. He realized that the founding titan might not be enough. He ordered the Kenny Ackerman squad to mobilize. He ordered them to hunt down the Survey Corps. He ordered them to kill the vampire. Far away on top of Wall Rose, the beast titan sat. He was watching the smoke rise from Stoes. He adjusted his glasses. He had felt the disturbance. He had felt the release of a massive amount of spiritual energy. He was confused. This was not in the memories of his predecessors. This was new. He scratched his hairy chest. He decided he needed to accelerate his plans. He needed to find the coordinate before this new variable ruined everything. He stood up. He looked at the horde of titans waiting below him. He gave the order. "Move out." A shot of the moon over Stohes. The city was broken. The walls were breached. The government was decapitated. And in the center of the darkness, Alucard sat on a throne made of rubble, drinking a bottle of vintage wine. He toasted the moon. He was happy. The war was finally getting good. The underground cavern beneath the Rice Chapel was a cathedral of glittering crystal and impending death. The air was cold and still, until the heavy iron door at the top of the stairs was kicked off its hinges. It flew through the air and shattered a pillar of glowing turquoise stone. Alucard stepped into the light. He was not smiling. He was not holding his guns. He walked down the stairs with his hands in his pockets, looking like a man taking a stroll through a graveyard, which, in a sense, he was. Waiting for him on the pillars in the ceiling were the anti-personnel control squad. They wore black leather and carried shotguns attached to maneuvering gear. They were the best killers the interior had to offer. Leading them was Kenny Ackerman. Kenny stood on the highest platform, his trench coat billowing in the draft. He tipped his hat. He looked at the monster in red. He had heard the stories. He didn't care. He had a dream, and to achieve it, he needed to clear the board. Kenny whistled. It was a sharp, piercing sound. The squad fired in unison. A dozen grapple hooks shot out and anchored into the stone around Alucard. Then the shotguns roared. The slugs were designed to shred human flesh. They hit Alucard from all sides. His red coat was torn to ribbons. His body was blown apart. Chunks of meat and bone sprayed across the crystal floor. His head was severed and rolled down the steps, coming to a stop at the bottom. The squad cheered. It was too easy. Kenny frowned. He knew better. He watched the head. The glasses were still on the face. The orange lenses glinted. The mouth on the severed head opened and laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound that froze the blood of every man in the room. The body at the top of the stairs dissolved into a swarm of black bats. The bats flew down and swirled around the head. They reformed into Alucard. He was whole. He was pristine. He brushed a speck of dust off his lapel. Alucard looked up at Kenny. He asked if that was the welcome ceremony. He said it was rude to ruin a guest's coat. Kenny grinned, but there was sweat on his brow. He reloaded his guns. He signaled for a second volley. But before they could fire, the shadows on the ceiling moved. They were not natural shadows. They were extensions of Alucard's will. They lashed out like whips. 3 squad members were bisected instantly. Their bodies fell to the floor in wet heaps. The others panicked. They zipped away on their gear, flying around the cavern like frightened flies. Alucard drew the jackal. He didn't aim. He just fired. The recoil was thunderous. A squad member moving at 60 miles per hour was hit in midair. The bullet tore him in half. Alucard spun and fired again. Another kill. He was shooting them out of the sky like clay pigeons. Kenny realized the tactical error. He couldn't fight this thing at a distance. He needed speed. He launched himself off the pillar. He flew toward Alucard, banking hard to avoid a shadow spike. He fired his guns point blank into Alucard's face. The head exploded again. Kenny didn't stop. He used the momentum to slash Alucard's chest with the knife under his gun barrel. He carved a massive X into the vampire's torso. Kenny landed behind him and spun around, ready for the counter. Alucard's head regrew in seconds. The wound on his chest closed with a hiss of steam that smelled like brimstone. Alucard turned to face Kenny. He applauded. He said Kenny was fast. He said Kenny smelled like a dog that had killed too many rabbits. Kenny spat on the floor. He asked Alucard what he was. Alucard smiled his shark-toothed smile. He said he was the evening news. While the monsters fought, the humans were enacting a tragedy of their own. Rod Rice was on the lower level holding a syringe filled with glowing fluid. He was screaming at his daughter Historia. He told her to inject herself. He told her to eat Eren Yeager, who was chained to a crystal altar nearby. Eren was gagged and helpless. He watched Alucard slaughtering the squad above. He felt a sick sense of relief. The monster was on his side, but then he looked at Rod Rice. He saw the madness in the old man's eyes. Historia took the syringe. She looked at her father. She looked at Eren. She remembered Ymir. She remembered the life she wanted to live. She threw the syringe on the ground. It shattered. Rod Rice stared at the broken glass. He stared at the fluid leaking into the cracks of the floor. His plan was ruined. His god was dying. He looked at Alucard, who was currently ripping the arms off a screaming MP. Rod realized there was no hope. If he couldn't control God, he would become the devil. He dropped to his knees. He licked the fluid from the floor. The transformation was wrong. It was instant and violent. The heat was intense. It set Historia's dress on fire. She cut it off and ran to Eren. She unlocked his chains. The cavern began to shake. Bright yellow light erupted from Rod Rice. His body expanded rapidly. It crushed the pillars. It crushed the remaining members of Kenny's squad. The ceiling began to fall. Alucard stopped playing. He looked at the expanding mass of flesh. He felt the heat. It was hotter than the sun. He didn't like fire. He dissolved into mist and grabbed Kenny Ackerman by the collar. He grabbed Eren and Historia. He flew up the shaft just as the entire underground chapel collapsed. The ground above swelled like a boil and then burst. A titan rose from the earth. But it was not a normal titan. It was a monstrosity. It was 120 meters tall. It had no face. It dragged itself on its stomach because its legs were too small to support its weight. It was a slithering mountain of steaming muscle. The Survey Corps had gathered at the edge of the Orvid district. They watched the birth of the Titan. Erwin Smith stood on the wall. He looked at the size of the enemy. It was twice the size of the Colossal. It was heading for the city. It was attracted to the density of the population. Behind it, Alucard landed on the grass. He dropped Kenny Ackerman, who was bleeding and broken. Levi walked up and put a blade to Kenny's throat. Kenny laughed. He said everyone was a slave to something. He said he was a slave to power and he had lost. Levi didn't kill him. He looked at the Titan. He looked at Alucard. He asked if the vampire could kill that thing. Alucard looked at the Rod Rice Titan. He adjusted his glasses. He said it was big. He said it was full of blood. But before he could formulate a plan, a roar echoed from the south. It was a deep, guttural sound that shook the trees. 3 figures appeared on the ridge overlooking the valley. The Beast Titan, the Armored Titan, the Colossal Titan. Zeke Yeager had arrived. He had seen the explosion. He had sensed the shift in the coordinate. He decided that the chaos was his ladder. He held a crushed boulder in his hand. He wound up his long arms. He threw. The rock broke the sound barrier. It slammed into the flank of the Rod Rice Titan. The impact was like a meteor strike. It blew a crater in the giant's side. But the Titan didn't stop. It just kept crawling. Zeke was confused. He looked at the soldiers on the wall. He saw Eren standing next to the man in red. Zeke's eyes widened. He recognized the man in red not from memory but from instinct. His Titan blood screamed at him to run. But Zeke was a tactician. He saw an opportunity. The humans were distracted. He ordered Reiner to attack. The armored Titan charged down the hill. He was heading for the wall. He was heading for Eren. Bertolt transformed. The Colossal Titan appeared in a flash of nuclear fire behind the Survey Corps lines. The heat wave blew soldiers off the wall. The situation had gone from a crisis to an apocalypse. They were surrounded. A God Titan in front, a Colossal behind, an armored charging the gate, and a beast throwing artillery from the hills. Erwin Smith looked at the board. Checkmate. There was no maneuver that could save them. He looked at Alucard. The vampire was standing on the edge of the wall. The wind was whipping his coat. He was smiling. It was a genuine smile. He was happy. He turned to Erwin. He asked for the order. Erwin didn't hesitate. He realized that to defeat monsters, he had to unleash the king of them all. He told Alucard to do whatever it took. He released the final restriction. Control Art Restriction System Level 0. Alucard closed his eyes. The air around him turned black. The sky darkened. The sun was blotted out by heavy, unnatural clouds. A red moon appeared in the darkness. Alucard spoke. Releasing Control Art Restriction Systems. 3, 2, 1. Approval of Situation A recognized. Commencing the Cromwell invocation. Ability restrictions lifted for limited use until the enemy is rendered silent. The vampire exploded. He didn't explode into fire. He exploded into a river of blood. It poured out of him like a breaking dam. It flooded the plains outside Orvard. It washed over the grass. It swirled around the ankles of the armored titan. Reiner stopped. He looked down. The blood was rising, and from the blood they came, the dead, the millions of lives Alucard had taken over the centuries. Knights in armor on skeletal horses, Turkish infantry with curved swords, Nazi soldiers with MP40s, Brazilian riot police with shields. They rose from the red sludge. They were silent. Their eyes glowed blue. They were the army of the damned. Reiner panicked. He punched a knight. The knight shattered, but the blood reformed him instantly. The dead swarmed the armored titan. They didn't have titan strength. They had numbers. They crawled over his armor. They stabbed their swords into his joints. They fired their guns into his eyes. Reiner roared and thrashed, but he was being buried under a mountain of corpses. He was drowning in the history of violence. Zeke watched from the hill. He had never seen anything like this. This was not Titan science. This was magic. This was hell. He tried to throw another rock, but a swarm of bats blinded him. He swiped at them, but they bit his fingers. He felt a cold dread in his stomach. He realized he had walked into a trap that had nothing to do with him. Alucard himself was no longer a man. He was the center of the storm. He was a massive, shadowy figure rising from the blood ocean. He was dressed in heavy plate armor. He held a broadsword the size of a building. He looked at the Rodrice Titan. The crawler was still moving toward the wall, ignoring the army of the dead. It was mindless. Alucard drifted toward it. The shadow merged with the blood. The river lifted up. It formed a tsunami of gore. It crashed into the Rodrice Titan. The heat of the Titan boiled the blood, creating a fog of red steam. But there was too much blood. It cooled the Titan's skin. It hardened the magma. Alucard materialized on the nape of the giant Titan. He was back in his red coat now. He was standing on the smoking flesh. He held his sword. He looked down at the city of Orvard. He saw the terrified faces of the civilians. He saw the horror in the eyes of the Survey Corps. He laughed. He raised the sword and plunged it into the nape. He didn't just cut. He absorbed. The darkness of his coat spread over the Titan like a disease. The Rodrice Titan stopped moving. It began to shrink. It was being eaten. The massive energy, the heat, the power was being sucked into Alucard. Rodrice screamed as his soul was ripped from his body and added to the legion. Behind the wall, the colossal Titan was wreaking havoc. Bertolt was burning the city. He kicked the gate, but then he stopped. He saw the river of blood flowing through the breach. The dead soldiers were climbing the colossal Titan's legs. They were immune to the heat. They were already dead. They climbed like ants. They reached the knees, the waist, the chest. Bertolt swiped them away, but more came. He was being consumed by a virus. He realized he couldn't win. He had to bail. He released the steam and ejected from the nape. He tried to use his gear to fly away, but a long musket barrel extended from the blood river. It was held by a skeletal marksman, Rip Van Winkle. She fired. The magic bullet curved through the air. It pierced Bertolt's maneuvering gear. It pierced his leg. He fell. He crashed onto a roof. He was surrounded by ghouls. He screamed for Reiner. Reiner heard him. He broke free from the pile of bodies. He was damaged. His armor was cracked. He charged the wall. He jumped over the blood river. He grabbed Bertolt. He didn't fight. He ran. He ran as fast as his Titan legs could carry him. Zeke saw them retreating. He looked at the battlefield. He looked at Alucard, who was now standing on the evaporating carcass of the Rodrice Titan. Alucard looked back at Zeke. The vampire made a gun shape with his hand and pointed it at the beast titan. He mouthed the word bang. Zeke flinched. He turned and fled. The warriors retreated. They had lost. The sun began to rise. The blood river receded. The dead sank back into the shadows. The bodies of the titans dissolved. The city of Orvad was half destroyed. The wall was damaged. But the enemy was gone. Alucard stood alone in the center of the plain. He was bloated. He had eaten a god. He burped. He walked back toward the gate. The soldiers of the Survey Corps did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They backed away from him. They held their weapons tight. They looked at him with more fear than they had ever looked at a titan. Even Levi looked disturbed. He had seen violence, but he had never seen industrial-scale necromancy. Eren Yeager walked out to meet him. Eren was covered in soot and blood. He had fought Reiner. He had held his own, but he felt small. He looked at Alucard. He saw the power that could end the world. He saw the cost. He saw the millions of souls trapped inside the vampire. Eren felt a strange resonance. He realized that this was the endgame. To defeat the monsters, you had to become a nightmare. Alucard stopped in front of Eren. He patted the boy on the head. "You did well," Alucard said. His voice was heavy, sated. "But you are still hesitating. You let the armored one escape. You let the monkey run. You still think there is a tomorrow where you can be clean." Eren looked at the horizon, where the warriors had vanished. He clenched his fists. "I will kill them," Eren said. "I will kill them all." Alucard smiled. "Good. But remember, Eren, when you kill a monster, you invite a new one in. Today you invited me to stay, and I have a very large appetite." Erwin Smith limped out of the gate. He had lost an arm in the chaos of the Colossal's attack. He was pale. He looked at the destruction. He looked at the victory. It was a victory. The coup was successful. The Rod Rice threat was ended. The warriors were repelled. Humanity was safe. But the price was standing right there in a red coat. Erwin realized he had traded a cage of titans for a cage of fear. He had made a deal with the devil to save his people. He looked Alucard in the eye. "Is it over?" Erwin asked. Alucard lit a cigar. He took a long drag. He blew the smoke into the face of the rising sun. "The battle is over, Commander," Alucard said. "But the war never ends. We just changed the players. Now the world knows I am here, and they will come for us. The Malians, the other nations. They will not send titans next time. They will send armies. They will send bombs. And I will be waiting." Hunger Zoe walked through the field. She was looking at the ground where the blood had been. She picked up a residue. It was black dust. She looked at Alucard with a mix of terror and scientific lust. She realized the fundamental laws of their world had been broken. Titans were biology. This was something else. This was theological. The surviving members of the Survey Corps gathered. Jean, Sasha, Connie, Mikasa, Armin. They were alive. But they were changed. They had seen the dead rise. They knew that their struggles against the Titans were just a skirmish in a much larger, darker universe. Armin looked at Eren. He saw the darkness in his friend's eyes. He saw Eren looking at Alucard not with fear, but with admiration. Armin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. He realized that Eren was learning the wrong lessons. Alucard turned and began to walk back to the city. He walked with a swagger. He was the king of the castle. The humans cleared a path for him. He was their savior and their executioner. As he passed under the broken gate of Orvad, he began to sing quietly. It was an old song, a song from a different world, a song about war and blood and the absurdity of it all. The gates closed behind him. The heavy sound of a prison door slamming shut. Humanity had won, and they were absolutely doomed. The report filed by War Chief Zeke Yeager was classified as Grade 0 insanity by the Malian military command. It described not a battle against island devils, but a massacre by a literal demon. The drawings provided by the artistically inclined Rainer Braun depicted a man in a red coat who could turn into shadows and summon the dead. The generals in Liberio scoffed at first. They called it mass hysteria. They called it an excuse for failure. Then they saw the casualty rates. They saw the psychological breaks in the returning warriors. Rainer Braun would wake up screaming in the night, clawing at his own skin, trying to get the phantom spiders off him. Bertolt Hoover refused to speak at all, staring at corners as if expecting them to bleed. The Malian government quietly suspended the Paradise Island operation. They did not send more ships. They did not send more Titans. They realized that sending biomass to the island was simply feeding the thing that lived there. Instead, they began to build bigger guns. They began to research the occult. The world had shifted. The era of Titans was ending, and the era of the supernatural had begun. Inside the walls, the atmosphere was suffocating. Historia Rice was crowned queen, but her coronation felt like a funeral. She sat on the throne with a heavy crown and heavier eyes. Standing behind her was not a royal guard, but the one-armed commander Erwin Smith. And lounging in the shadows of the throne room, sipping a glass of the Royal Reserve, was Alucard. The public knew him as the hero of Orvad. The military knew him as the nuclear option. The Survey Corps had reclaimed Wall Maria within weeks. It was not a heroic struggle. Alucard simply walked to Shiganshina and liquidated the remaining Titans. The basement was found. The truth of the world was revealed. Humanity was not extinct. They were just hated. But the revelation did not bring the usual despair. It brought a cold, grim determination. They had a weapon that the world feared. Eren Yeager stood at the edge of the island a year later. The ocean lapped at his boots. It was vast and blue and salty, just as Armin had said. Armin stood beside him, smiling with tears in his eyes, holding a seashell. Mikasa was checking the perimeter, her vigilance never fading. But Eren did not look at the horizon with wonder. He looked at it with hunger. He felt the connection to the coordinate. He felt the millions of colossal titans sleeping in the walls. And he felt the presence of Alucard standing a few yards away under a black umbrella to block the sun. The vampire was bored again. He kicked the sand. He looked at Eren. He asked the boy what he saw. Eren pointed across the water. He didn't say he saw enemies. He didn't say he saw freedom. He said he saw a buffet. Alucard grinned. The influence was complete. The boy had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had given him a gun. The story of the Titans was over. The story of the hunter had begun. And as the waves crashed against the shore, the world held its breath, waiting for the night to fall.